What is up, everyone? Welcome into the Fight HQ preview show for UFC Vegas 68, Bellator 290. Of course, both going down on Saturday. Of course, the UFC show there in Las Vegas at the UFC Apex. And then when you talk about the Bellator card, that's over in LA. And Pete, this is actually one of those weeks where I think for the most part, the MMA community is probably more interested in the Bellator card than they are the UFC card.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait for both of them. It's going to be one heck of a weekend for mixed martial arts, but you have Bellator kicking it off for us, and then following it, if you are, a night owl, you'll be able to check out the UFC card, which is riddled with a lot of hungry fighters for sure, and tipped off with the main event between Serghei Spivac and Derrick Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, something we should note about that UFC card, the reason for the late start time is this is the finishing up of the Road to UFC tournament they were doing over in Asia. This card was actually supposed to take place in Seoul, South Korea. Initially, it was going to be headlined by the Korean Zombie. Unable to perform on this date. So this is why the fight card has been moved to Vegas. Also why it is a later start time, 10 p.m. East Coast time for the prelims. Main card, 1 a.m. Eastern time. So for us DFS players, we got to get those lineups in by 10 o'clock Eastern time. Pete, just being honest about it, the odds of me being up to watch this main card are about 2%.
Really? I mean, I'm off. So, when I'm off on a Saturday night and there's fights, I'm going to take advantage of it and make sure that I'm sitting down and enjoying the fights and hopefully build my bankroll enough throughout the Bellator fights to then have a very successful UFC night. So I would recommend you guys doing the same thing. Start, picking spots on the Bellator card, setting yourself up for success, and then taking advantage of some of these lines for the UFC card, and of course playing some DFS.
Yeah, there is over on the Bellator side with looking at some of those lines for some of these fights, I did find it interesting. I will tell you this, I was surprised how big of a betting favorite Ryan Bader is against Fedor Emelianenko. I would have thought like minus 200. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be approaching 3.5, 4-1 betting favorite in that one. I mean, look, the under 1.5 on Sabah Homasi and Brandon Ward is juiced, but good reasons why that under 1.5 line is juiced there. But I will tell you, I think on the prelims, which by the way, I mean, it's a stacked preliminary card Bellator's put on. I do think there are some potential interesting underdogs over there.
On Bellator?
Yes.
Interesting. I definitely want to hear it. Starting off with the main event between Fedor Emelianenko and Ryan Bader, I would agree that I think the line is a little too wide for Ryan Bader. I think there was a point throughout Bader's reign, and he's still, doing well, but he looked like he was next level, like untouchable. And then you start looking at it a little bit more, his most recent bouts, and obviously the Czech Congo one, he looked fine, but the one before that against, I believe it was Valentin Moldavsky, pulling it up at the moment, but yes, Moldavsky. A lot of the media members scored that fight for Moldavsky. I believe it was 7 of 11 media members scored that fight for Moldavsky, and Moldavsky's damn good. He really is. I mean, his record doesn't speak for how talented he is because he's only 11-1 at the time. But I will tell you that it's just interesting, right? Like 40-6 Fedor Emelianenko, 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out. Retirement fight. Usually retirements don't go the way that it's not always a happy ending, as you and I were talking about before the show. You brought that up to me, and you're so right. I mean, think about Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo, or like tons of people that you go out not under your, under your best performances. Never mind like out on top, like Khabib Nurmagomedov or George St. Pierre. I think the line's a little wide, so I'm going to put some fun money on Fedor Emelianenko. I just feel like some horrible punch lands for Fedor against Ryan Bader, and we do know that when Ryan Bader gets touched on the chin, he turtles, and he really doesn't respond well to getting bullied. Perhaps this could be a situation where, the atmosphere of Fedor's retirement fight gets to him. Maybe not. I mean, he might go out there and just put it to Fedor and get rid of him relatively quickly, but I'll be putting some small money on Fedor. Other than that, I'm not going to touch the fight.
Yeah, when I pulled the betting lines up earlier today in my spreadsheet here. Ryan Bader minus 340 plus 280 on Fedor Emelianenko. And I remember yesterday when I was looking at the Fedor wins by TKO KO, you're not getting, I mean, pretty much it was exactly what the money line prop on this one is. And I mean, think about Shogun just, 2 weeks ago, the fact of, retirements typically don't end the way you want them to here. The question, one thing we've even seen Fedor at the later stage of his career is that hand speed has still been there. The question is, and I mean, look at, and I say it in a very joking manner a lot, but Father Time hits everyone, and that's kind of my concern with this one. What kind of game plan does Ryan Bader come out with here? The first fight did not last long, and this is probably a fight, Pete, where it's just going to be a matter of who catches someone on the chin immediately. We'll see what happens there. Talk about those preliminary cards and underdogs, and we're going to get into UFC here momentarily, but since we're talking Bellator, we're kind of go through this card. How about Lorenz Larkin at plus 185? I think that's an interesting underdog line there. Ali Asif against Steve Mallory at plus 110, what concerns me, hasn't fought in 3 years. Of course, former PFL champion. I do like Grant Neal at plus 125 against Carl Albrechtsen. Darian Caldwell plus 135 is interesting. I had a fascinating conversation with Darian Caldwell about 2 weeks ago, where he's talked about it's 13 months between fights for him. And he spoke about the fact of he really tore everything down, not just from a physical aspect, but from a mental aspect. So I'm kind of, and he's talked about, and he wants to welcome Patricio Pitbull to the 135-pound division because Patricio's hinted about going down to 135. I don't like the big number on Jornel Lugo. I like him to win the fight. I just think it's just such a wide number there. And the other two prelim fights are both local fights where you got one guy who's a 5-1 betting favorite.
Yeah, usually I don't really like picking underdogs on Bellator. If there's a spot that I like, of course I'll attack it. Haven't really gone in depth with a lot of them, but when I've looked at it and I've seen what Darian Caldwell has done lately, seems like he's like mentally defeated a lot of times throughout his bouts. You know what I mean? Like the skills are always there, the wrestling's there, just putting it all together. The cardio is inconsistent, which is always a worry for me. But this was a guy that was, thought of as one of the next big things, if not going to be a long reigning champion for a while. I don't know, man, but I'm not going to really touch most of these underdogs. You have question marks surrounding Grant Neal and Carl Albrechtsen. Albrechtsen's phenomenal grappler. Grant Neal, very talented in his own right. Horrible cardio for both of them. So it's a matter of who's going to gas first. If I'm going to look at any of these, I'm going to look at Chris Gonzalez. I'm just not really a believer in Max Roshkopf. And I do think that Chris Gonzalez has the wrestling to basically nullify anything Max does. And I think that he has the striking advantage over Max. So Chris Gonzalez would probably be one of my first Bellator undercard plays. Outside of that, I love my boy Lorenz Larkin, but I'm not really fascinated with the matchup. If I start kind of navigating throughout this Bellator card, I start going mainly to the main card. Like that's where I'm going to be, focused on my bets. I like Naaman Gracie. I do think that Dante Sciro had a very close fight and kind of overperformed in one of his bouts. And I just think that a guy in Naaman Gracie is going to have his number everywhere. I would recommend people putting money on the under 1.5 between Brennan Ward and Sabah Homasi. It's approaching -2-1 territory. I think that they're both prolific finishers. I'm going to be rooting like hell for my boy Brennan Ward in hopes that he puts together a strong performance. Johnny Eblin is going to be a staple for a lot of my Bellator bets. I just think that this kid is the real deal. I was convincing my friends that he was going to beat Gegard. Sure did. And I just think that this is going to be Johnny Eblin's belt for quite some time.
No, Anatoly Tokov, he's legit. But I'm a big believer in Johnny Eblin in terms of this one. But it's I'm looking forward to seeing what Bellator looks like. Of course, network debut that'll be on Saturday night. So look, if you want to make it a long marathon of mixed martial arts action on Saturday, 6 o'clock each time is when the Bellator prelims start. Main card 9 o'clock, so it'll be a little bit of a carryover between UFC and Bellator because the UFC show's starting at 10 o'clock. If you want to, probably Derrick Lewis and Serghei Spivac ultimately will probably hit the cage 3 a.m.
Jeez.
3:30 East Coast time. Once again, this is why you're once again envious of people who live on the West Coast, because it really is the best coast for mixed martial arts action.
Yeah, for sure. And I will tell you that this is kind of where I'm sitting with my Bellator bets. Very, very careful and methodical with it so far. As we approach the card and we get closer, we see the weigh-ins. I do a little bit more in-depth research on the prelims and all that. You can find all of our plays inside our Discord channel. It's free to join. It's in the description below. It's basically just like a community where we're in there talking fights all day long. So please, join our Discord channel. It's in the description below. In addition to that, if you guys can like the video, get us over 50 likes for this video. We really appreciate it. And of course, we appreciate all the support, all the subscribers to our channel here at Fight HQ.
Of course, I gotta say I appreciate my guy Pete for doing the show on a Thursday, as I'm not gonna be able to wasn't gonna be able to do a show on Friday, as taking a little day off, I guess you would say, quote unquote, like in my world, somewhat of a day off. Pete, yeah. I think we're very similar. I don't think there is such a thing as a day off when you're self-employed. So, but appreciate it. But of course, let's get into UFC Vegas 68 main event. Derrick Lewis, Serghei Spivac. Of course, this was a matchup that was supposed to take place a little while ago, back in, what was it, December, I want to say, when these two. And of course, it gets canceled on fight day. Derrick Lewis came out this week and mentioned about the reason it was canceled was because of COVID. And I saw where he basically said, he's like, every bad symptom of COVID he had. And if you've seen the pictures on social media, Pete, he's looking good.
Well, thanks, Jason. I didn't know anything about that, about the COVID situation. Again, I've been slammed with everything, but I have done, extensive research, fight film research, not media research. So, I mean, that doesn't inspire confidence in Derrick Lewis at all. For me to bet him, I was backing Serghei Spivac to begin with in this matchup, and then now you have the delay, and they decide to go again with this matchup. It's a little bit of a head scratcher for me, because I think that, stylistically, Serghei presents a lot of problems for Derrick Lewis. He's a very big guy, phenomenal wrestling for the division, excellent ground and pound, and one of the best submission skills within the division. Now that there's no longer Fabricio Verdum, who knows if, no more Alexei Olenek. I do think that Serghei Spivac has some of the best jiu-jitsu in submission skills within the division. So we've always seen Derrick Lewis get put in bad positions, and he kind of Hercules his way out. I don't know, man. I do think that him getting in better shape towards the tail end of his career is a little ironic. But, just running miles and, putting in road work is great, but it doesn't always, equate to being in phenomenal fight shape. Fight shape's more about sprints and more about interval training. Just slow distance running doesn't really translate as much as people think. Yes, you have to put your miles in and you have to get your road work in, but I almost think that the bigger frame Derrick Lewis would have helped him in this situation, where his physicality could somewhat nullify Serghei Spivac's attacks within the wrestling and jiu-jitsu department. And it might be a little bit easier for Serghei Spivac to kind of have his way in the clinch. We did see what he did to Greg Hardy. I mean, he tossed him over his head. So I'm interested in the matchup. It's heavyweight MMA, one of the most volatile divisions and one of the most volatile bets you could ever put. So I wouldn't put it in a part of a parlay. This is how a parlay gets busted all day long. I would be, split exposure when it comes to DFS, and I am siding with Serghei Spivac here at 8,800. I think it's a fair salary. 5 rounds. Don't think it goes 5 rounds. One way or another, I think we get a finish. But Derrick Lewis has to be in that 25% within your lineups, and especially if you're playing, 150 max, you have to get to Derrick Lewis, because when Serghei gets hit on the chin, he doesn't respond well. It's just a matter of, if he gets hit on the chin. Walt Harris did it to him. Tom Aspinall did it to him. But outside of that, he's looked like the ever-improving fighter of the two.
The way I look at this, Pete, is I view Serghei Spivac as a better mixed martial artist, and whether he can implement that game. But it's very similar kind of the conversation we have Fedor. The power is the last thing to go, and from a DFS perspective, I want to get to Derrick Lewis. I don't know, like if I'm playing in a 150 max, probably I'd be at 25%. I don't think I would go much higher than that. I do want to get the Serghei Spivac in this one. I mean, you look at the betting lines here. Serghei Spivac minus 190 plus 230 for Derrick Lewis. I mean, I think that's priced the way it should be. But to me, I think it should be Serghei Spivac. I kind of feel like we in 12, 16 months from now, we may be talking about Serghei Spivac challenging for the UFC heavyweight title.
Yeah, I mean, he's super legitimate, and I really like him. He's gotten a lot of experience training alongside Francis Ngannou and those guys at Extreme Couture. Not really sure if he's a part of them for this camp, but what I will say is that I think Serghei has improved. He really has improved. Derrick Lewis, in a lot of his wins even, he's losing until he lands that big shot. And, you could bet that way in hopes that he kind of pulls out that Hail Mary. Sometimes that Hail Mary doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And I do think that Serghei Spivac is the side that I'm going to be, picking. And, I mean, we saw, Daniel Cormier say that he thinks Derrick Lewis is going to knock out Serghei Spivac, but he thinks Lewis's time at the top is completely done. And that kind of pissed Derrick Lewis off a little bit. So maybe a little fire. I don't really think it's going to make a difference here. It's going to be a good fight. But of course, I have to side with Serghei Spivac, and the 25% exposure to Derrick Lewis, I think, is going to be fair.
Look, I don't think Cormier is wrong in saying that that Derrick Lewis's time at the top of this division is over. I mean, I think that this could be a situation that if Derrick Lewis does not get a win on Saturday night, that you could see the UFC part ways with Derrick Lewis just based on what they're playing. Barry, appreciate you over there in chat. He says books are begging us to bet Lewis first round plus 500, second round plus 900, third round plus 2,200. Because of this, I got to take Spivac. Look, I will say this. I mean, Derrick Lewis, for whatever reason, I mean, you think the guy is just gassed out, and then, we saw it in the Alexander Volkov fight with 10 seconds left in the third round, knocks him out. We see him, do it late in the fight. I do think that if you tell me this fight hits the fourth or fifth round, Derrick Lewis is live. That's why, from a DFS perspective, don't mind getting there, but I think he's going to be a punt play for a lot of people in terms of this. Let's move over to the next one. We got Jung and Clark. Clark 7,500 on DK, 8,700 for Dong Jung. Jung a minus 240 betting favorite, plus 200 for Devin Clark. And Devin Clark, man, this guy's been around the UFC. I think this is like his 14th or 15th UFC fight. It's he's been around for a long time, but when I think of Devin Clark, Pete, the image that comes in my mind is him just wanting to get his opponent up against the fence.
Yeah, I mean, he is desperate to get his opponents against the cage. And every time I think of Devin Clark, I think of his dad, because you can hear his dad just screaming in the corner all the time. Now, I believe he said he's not going to be a part of this camp. I don't think it makes a difference. Devin Clark's a guy that I've, been able to pick against in a lot of his bouts and pick correctly. When I think that his wrestling isn't going to be advantageous and he's going to get picked apart on the feet, or he's going to get submitted. He's 7-7 in the UFC, as you mentioned. I think that Dooho Jung is a big physical guy with power in his hands, power everywhere. And I actually think that he has some pretty damn good wrestling himself. Offensive wrestling, solid defensive wrestling as well. But Devin Clark's a guy that's really going to test you. Anytime you're talking about getting a wrestler as an underdog, you can kind of put an asterisk next to him. 7,500, I think, is because of the wrestling ability of Devin Clark. But, he'll attempt a ton of takedowns. He landed 2 of 5 against William Knight before he knocked him out in the third round. He went 1 of 6 against Ion Cutelaba, 1 of 10 against Alonzo Menafield. He's going to attempt a high amount of takedowns and a large number of wall and stall cage control. I just don't like him here in this matchup against Dooho Jung. Now, you have to be careful because Dooho Jung's coming off a recent knockout defeat to Dustin Jacoby, where Dustin Jacoby's glory kickboxing was really shining through, and even his UFC success is pretty ridiculous. Dustin Jacoby hit him with a gorgeous combination, planted Dooho Jung, and that was over. I do think that the fact that it was back in July is, very good because it allowed him some time to heal. I think that was the proper amount of time to come back here in February. And I'm going to be picking Dooho Jung here at 8,700. I think he has a sneaky upside here en route to getting a knockout victory over Devin Clark. Devin Clark does not like taking punishment at all. There have been times where he kind of has that mentally checked out, body language about him. And when he gets hit or he gets bullied, he starts to look for the exit in a way, especially if he cannot find the takedown to kind of, secure himself. So give me Da Jung here. I think there's like 85 to 95 point upside. The issue is at 8,700, there's probably some better plays. But as far as like a prop play, I do have Da Jung as a KO prop, a part of some of my picks.
I've never been, in terms of DFS, from a fantasy upside, I've just never been big on Devin Clark. By the way, there was something we were talking about before the show about these PFL announcements. Malky Kawa, who happens to represent Brendan Loughlin and several other PFL fighters, goes, the PFL went and announced a bunch of fights that have not been agreed to, so hold up your excitement about anything.
Oh, damn. Was that the Loughlin and Marlon Moraes fight that he's kind of referring to?
He represents Loughlin. He also represents Shimon Moraes and Shane Burgos. There was a Shane Burgos fight announced as well too. So
good Lord.
Yeah, I don't know why Marlon Moraes' camp thinks it's a good idea to take on Brendan Loughlin. I don't know why the PFL will book that fight. But, just something I throw out there. It's something I just saw go across my Twitter timeline.
As soon as that line drops, I'm going and attacking it because Brendan Loughlin is going to make it look easy against Marlon Moraes if that fight does happen. So that's just poor management. It really is. Like, I mean, yeah. How many times we got to see it from Marlon Moraes? Like, give him a softball matchup. Let him get some confidence back. He's just fighting killers after killers. And I understand, he is a killer himself, but he has been getting destroyed lately.
We talked about lines being juiced, like the under 1.5 on Sabah Hamasi and Brandon Ward. The over 2.5 is going to be juiced on this next one. Marcin Tybura and Blagoy, Ivanov 7,900, 8,300 for Tybura. Tybura minus 130 betting favorite, plus 110 for Blagoy Ivanov. Blagoy Ivanov has gone to decision in all 6 of his UFC matchups. He hasn't won a fight via stoppage since 2017. Prior to that, it was 2015. Look, this is one of those from a DFS perspective, Pete. I don't like this fight at all. Like, if you wanted to get there in cash, okay, I get it. But in terms of a GPP, this is just a fight that I'm gonna have minimal exposure to.
Blagoy Ivanov is just annoying. You know what I mean? It's annoying because like he's going to make you work. He's going to push you in all areas, even if it's a completely slow pace. And then he'll make the decision super narrow. Like it's always seems like it's a close fight when Blagoy Ivanov's in there. And you can even have a guy in Marcin Tybura who I think is 2 times the MMA fighter that Blagoy Ivanov. He could go in there and just stylistically, Ivanov's a difficult matchup because he can defend takedowns. He can get his own takedowns. He will go tit for tat with you on the feet. And yeah, you may have gotten, the better punches in, but he may get, a couple more. So he might be able to get a little bit less efficient punches in, but a little bit more volume, or vice versa. It's always a head scratcher for me, which is kind of why I really dislike the heavyweight division. And as far as a lot of people really enjoy watching heavyweight fights, it seems like it's always a coin flip, especially when you're talking about the mid to low level. At the top level, it's pretty easy to figure out. But Marcin Tybura, Blagoy Ivanov, I'm not going to be like in love with this fight from a DFS standpoint. I think that Marcin Tybura is going to be the pick. He scored 59 against Alexander Romanov, got that majority decision. I think that he has upside, and I've been waiting for somebody to knock out Blagoy Ivanov. I just don't know if it's going to happen. And I've been waiting for Blagoy Ivanov to get a finish, and I don't think that's going to happen. So this could be a pass for me. I'm going to be picking Marcin Tybura to win the bout. I think that he's the better fighter here in 2023. 10-6 in the UFC, 3-3 for Blagoy Ivanov. It just doesn't seem like a DFS play. You know what I mean? And I 100% would not put this a part of my parlay because I could see Blagoy Ivanov winning some split decision, and you'd just be upset that you put him a part of the parlay. So, give me Marcin Tybura. Minimal upside for both of them. If there is a finish, I would like to think that Tybura finds it somehow. he has an excellent ground game, and he has some pretty sneaky striking as well. And, Father Time is undefeated and approaching Blagoy Ivanov at the tail end of his career. So I'm picking Marcin Tybura. Hopefully he shocks us all and actually outperforms what we're expecting.
I wonder how many people know the Blagoy story.
About the stabbing? Was it the stabbing? Is that what it is?
Yeah, remember he got stabbed in a bar, went and got in a cab for the cab driver to drive him to the hospital.
Yeah, man. That's crazy.
He's a tough dude to finish, man.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll tell you. So when he took on a Volkov in the Bellator heavyweight tournament back in the day, so that was part of the pay-per-view they did there just outside of Memphis. And so about 3 weeks before that, I'm in Revel there in Atlantic City with the Bellator production staff doing. I was basically kind of one of the voices of the pre-fight piece for this fight. I can't tell you how many questions that because you've done this. We're in these production meetings. They've got the camera lights on me, and they must ask me 30 questions related to him getting stabbed.
Yeah,
I'm like, what do you want to say? He's one tough cookie, man.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a story, you definitely have to vocalize it, and Blagoy Ivanov is super tough. I don't know who knows if you can finish the man inside the UFC, but that he's going to fight for your money, and that's why a lot of people like picking Blagoy Ivanov, in underdog spots, because he's going to fight for your dollar, even if it's just a terrible visual performance.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is just like, if you're looking to find a leverage play on Saturday, this will be a fight that will be a leverage fight. But unfortunately, I just think it's going to go 15 minutes. And, in a 15-minute fight, what's our fantasy score ceiling?
Yeah,
85 points?
I mean, I was just looking at that because when I'm looking at when Ivanov won a decision and scored decent, the only one that sticks out is his decision win against Tai Tuivasa, which was back in 2019 before Tai became, a superstar. He landed 2 of 2 takedowns, threw 123 significant strikes, landed 73, and had about 2 minutes of control time en route to 85 points. I don't know how those stats equaled 85 points, but somehow it does. The most recent decision win was against Marcos Rogério de Lima, where he scored 64. I think that's kind of like the wheelhouse where this fantasy production is going to be, in the 60s. So I'm going to be moving on from it. Hopefully people that don't just target it for leverage, get paid off and it ends up working out for them, because I think this is going to be a bad DFS fight.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And of course, we should note no more late swap on DraftKings.
Thank God.
Announced. Yeah, thank God. Yeah, it's that at the end of the day, that just. And even like I saw professional, quote unquote professional DFS players out there going, man, they hated this because it was like, man, we can just settle on. It's like, that's the worst part about playing NBA or any other sports where, then you're just late swapping it. And I think, unfortunately, it's just the ones that affects the most is just your casual DFS player, because, you've got professional players who are looking at percentages and they're figuring out who's owned and who's not owned.
Well, I think the funniest thing was that people who utilized late swap actually were punished these past couple months, because if you actually late swapped, because DraftKings screwed up with the times of the fights going off and unlocking and locking certain fighters, you were avoided all your bets. So me, I left it alone. So I was not bothered at all. But the people that were going to take advantage of the late swap system were like, hey, what are you doing? Like, if this is going to be late swap, you're kind of punishing us for utilizing your tool. So, with all that being said, thank God it's back to how it was. Cancellations, same day cancellations are rare within MMA without knowing before the card. You know what I mean? Like, as the card starts, getting mid-card cancellations is super rare. It's like, so when that happened throughout the COVID era, those were kind of like anomalies in my opinion. Usually we'll know the day before who doesn't clear medicals. We'll know the morning of who woke up sick from a bad weight cut, or who wasn't medically cleared, or was unable to get the correct forms from their doctors or whatever. So with all that being said, we're back to having a normal MMA DFS experience.
No doubt about it. Let's move over. Next up, we got a man who's returning for the first time since 2019. That's the Korean Superboy. I don't know. You know, he's 31 years old, so I don't know if we can call him the Superboy anymore. Dooho Choi taking on Kyle Nelson. Dooho Choi 8,600, 7,600 for Kyle Nelson. Dooho Choi a minus 190 betting favorite, plus 160 underdog for Kyle Nelson.
Yeah, Jason. So, I mean, a lot of unknowns within this matchup, right? Dooho Choi has been away from the cage since 2019. We have Kyle Nelson, who has taken a ton of damage throughout his career. I thought he was going to get finished by Jai Herbert. He didn't, but that was back in July of 2022. So we have Kyle Nelson, who's been acclimated to the octagon a little bit more so than the Superboy. I think, like, stylistically, Kyle Nelson's a sucker for a right hand, as evidenced in the Billy Quarantillo fight. Just everywhere you see him, he gets hit with right hands all the time. He throws good, powerful combinations and is willing to engage in a firefight, which I think can work to his detriment here, because I think Dooho Choi's hand speed is phenomenal. His accuracy is great. His durability is what's in question for me, right? Like, because I think Dooho Choi is a guy that got rushed to the top level a little bit too quickly, coming off of back-to-back-to-back first-round finishes within the UFC. They give him a matchup against an aging veteran in Cub Swanson, thinking that he can kind of, steal the shine of Cub Swanson and start to become this international superstar. It was a little bit too much too soon. And we did see him have success against Cub Swanson. But, Jason, he took a tremendous amount of damage within that bout against Cub Swanson. And it's a type of damage that you don't know if they're going to ever recover from. It's kind of like that's gonna last with you throughout your entire career. Then you follow it up with Jeremy Stevens TKOing him in the second round. And then what I thought was going to be a tailor-made matchup for Dooho Choi against Charles Jourdain, he drops him, hurts him, as all Dooho Choi fights go, and then he ends up getting finished in the second round. So I don't know what to think about his chin as far as skill level. I think that he is the superior fighter within this matchup. Hand speed, he looks to be in phenomenal shape on his Instagram, and I know that he's been training a lot of jiu-jitsu as well. I think Kyle Nelson's going to engage in the striking until he starts to get picked apart, look to get it to the mat, and try to be the more powerful of the two, but I think you'll be surprised that Dooho Choi is going to be wise to it. Outside of Kyle Nelson landing a big shot against the questionable chin of Dooho Choi, I think this is a nice step down of competition for Dooho Choi to kind of get his feet back underneath him, Jason, en route to a nice finish. I think he's going to knock out Kyle Nelson here, and I think the price point's completely fine. 8,600 for a guy who was thought to be one of the next big things. He was priced at 9,400 against Charles Jourdain. So that's just something to note. And he was priced at 8,900 against Cub Swanson. So I think that the 8,600 for Dooho Choi is going to be a staple within a lot of my lineups, and I'm just going to hope that his chin holds up.
Yeah, one of my thoughts kind of, when I looked at the price point for this card, my general thought was like, I feel like this is kind of like that get back right fight that we see promotions put together, and that's what I kind of feel here with what they're going to do here. Let's move over. Next up, we got a matchup between Kinoshita and Fugitt. Fugitt 7,100, 9,100 here for the favorite, minus 330, plus 260. I spoke to Adam probably about 3 weeks to this point, and my two big takeaways from the conversation was, he talked about going to the UFC PI, and he did all the testing, and he said, I thought I was a good size 170-pound fighter. And he says, well, then after they did all the testing, the PI trainers go, yeah, you're one of the smallest 170ers in the UFC right now. So he's really been looking to pack on some size. But the other thing that really stuck out to me is he feels like he is being brought in as the B side of this fight, which is accurate. But then he also said, he's like, I don't want people to think I'm a gatekeeper.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Adam Fugitt impressed in his debut against Michael Morales, who a lot of people hold in high regard. I think that Michael Morales is really, really talented. We saw Fugitt attempt 8 takedowns in that. He landed one of them with 1 minute and 51 seconds of control time. So I thought that was super impressive because Michael Morales is very physical for the division. Um, and as far as like striking wise, he was doing decent. He was, landed 70 of 100 total strikes, 64 of 113 significant strikes. But as the fight started to go along, you saw Michael Morales start picking up the pace, knocked him down twice en route to a third round finish. I think that he is being brought in here to lose, and I think that Yusaku Kinoshita is very, very talented. Packs some dynamite in his hands. The only unknown is how does his wrestling, defense, how does his takedown defense hold up? The 9100 price tag is to truly show that he has a phenomenal ceiling. He has a phenomenal ceiling to punish Adam Fugitt on the feet. Fugitt will engage, and I think that he will be hit with the harder shots. Kinoshita's striking in his hands alone, how he's able to slip off the center line, how he's able to capitalize as a counter fighter, and then he starts to work, his offensive strikes as well. I think that Kinoshita should get this done. Like he really should. But the only reason I'm not crossing off Adam Fugitt is because of how he looked in his debut against Michael Morales. But in addition to that, it's just the unknowns about Kinoshita's takedown defense, especially against a decent wrestler in Adam Fugitt. So I'm still going to be picking Kinoshita, but I'm not crossing off Adam Fugitt. I don't think many people are going to get to him at 7,100. I would say he's going to be, under the 20% range, which anytime we have fighters under the 20%, I like to go a little bit more aggressive on their ownership in hopes of getting different from the field. So I'm expecting a Kinoshita knockout here. Everything I've seen, just the power seems like it's going to really hurt Adam Fugitt. And we also don't know how healed he is. He's coming off a knockout defeat to Morales back in July of 2022. That's an adequate amount of time. But I still think that Kinoshita is just going to get it done. I think he looks to be like one of the next big striking international talents out there.
Yeah, I mean, Fugitt, just kind of speaking to him, I think, I pretty much took that. He's like, look, I gotta institute my wrestling base in this one. So,
Yeah.
We'll see if that happens in terms of that one. That is the main card. Now, basically, this becomes the international prelims. It is about the best way to put it over here. First off, when you started kind of diving into this, were you kind of like, oof, we're going to be very choosy in our spots here?
Yeah, it was really difficult, if I'm being honest. It was very difficult. Full transparency, I'm expecting this to be one of the most difficult cards for people to get right. Just because of the international talent, a lot of people are lazy with their research. And not only being lazy with the research, it's hard to find a lot of the fight footage from these guys. It really is. So I found most of them, and I really started to go and dive through social media with with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find everything. So I would expect there to be a lot of variance, and probably the best way to embrace this from a DFS sense is to get to more of these international underdogs, because people are just going to be looking at the lines and thinking that it's going to be automatic wins. I did do some solid research on everybody here, so I feel like I have a pretty good feel for everyone. And then the first one that we'll talk about is Anshul Jubli against Jeka Saragih, and the line is appropriate. It really is a pick'em, because I think this is going to be one of the lowest level international fights on the card, as far as like it's a well-matched fight. I don't think both of these guys have a tremendous ceiling within the division. I saw some work that Anshul Jubli looks to be pretty talented from the long range striking, good straight punches, whereas Jeka Saragih definitely has the higher upside and has the more finishing ability. So I'm going to be treating these guys as I do almost every week. The 8,200, 8,000 fight is going to be like a 1A, 1B for me, where I'm getting to split exposure. But what I did like from Anshul Jubli, and I am picking him in the bout, is a lot of his pad work and a lot of his training throughout this, Jason, was combining his hands into takedown setups, which I think can actually, throw off his opponent here, Saragih, en route to, winning a decision. He is not a prolific finisher, whereas Saragih is. And I think Saragih has the 100-point upside, but Anshul Jubli can actually win a 15-minute decision just by being the more intelligent fighter of the two and the less reckless.
Yeah, people ask about the road to the UFC. I believe it's on UFC Fight Pass.
Yeah,
That's where you can
yeah,
check that out at.
and they have some of them on Twitter videos and some of them on YouTube as well. Just kind of looking, and they have the highlights of it, but in addition to that, you can kind of see where they have the long the matchups on there as well. So it was tough. It really was.
Next up, you got Lee and Ja. Lee, a 900, Ja 7,300. Lee, a minus 260 betting favorite, plus 210 for Ja.
Yeah, so I got to pull up my notes because I don't want to get confused as to who I'm talking about. And no offense, it's just like a lot of it's difficult. And what I'm going with the underdog here in Jai. So when you look at the line, you see that Lee JeongYwong is minus 245, whereas Yi Jia is plus 205. And then when you go and you start to look at the records, you have Jia Yi, who's 21-3, and JeongYwong Lee is 9-1. So you have a vast experience advantage for Jia Yi. They are both really, really young. Jia Yi, who has the more fights, he has 25 professional fights. He's 26 years old. JeongYwong Lee has 10 fights, and he's 27 years old. I do think that the Korean Tiger, Lee, is very, very dangerous. But with that dangerous type of style, there's volatility. And he kind of fights like Justin Gaethje a little bit. And he goes crazy where he hunts finishes, and he's super aggressive with footwork and willing to bite down on the mouthpiece and trade exchanges with you. He has phenomenal finishing ability, even if he gets put in a bad position. So on the mat, I think this kid is legitimate everywhere. Lots of round one finishes via punches, in addition to an armbar. But the armbar, when he has 3 wins by armbar, and then I go back and I look at the tape, it shows me that you're getting put on your back a lot. And when you're going up against a guy in Jia Yi, who's 21-3, actually 22-3, has fought such a higher level of competition just because there's been more fights. Has been knocked out one time. That was back in 2021. So I'm a little bit worried about his chin in this situation. I just think he has more ways to win here. I think that he's the more well-rounded of the two. I think that his wrestling is superior to Lee in this situation. And I was surprised when I was actually looking at the salary. So Yi Jia is going to be my underdog play of the week. I expected this to be like 7,700. At 7,300, it kind of makes me like it even more. And I'm going to be picking Yi Jia to get the victory here just by utilizing his wrestling. I think even on the feet, he can hurt Yong Lee. But I think that, the difference in this bout is going to be one in the wrestling exchanges in the top position. So give me Yi Jia to win this bout as a 7,300 underdog.
I always like hearing these underdogs when you come in here
and
let me know maybe who I should have a little more exposure to. Because these are fights that I just think that, as we're breaking it down and developing our lineups for DraftKings, it's kind of about figuring out who are the best ones to take. Now, one of the most expensive fighters on Saturday is Nakamura at 9,300, taking on Kazama at 6,900. A minus 450 betting favor for Nakamura. So, is he a guy that's a top of the ticket parlay piece for you today?
Yeah, so my notes says exactly. Rinya Nakamura, the hybrid, has excellent wrestling and developing striking. Could be a slate breaker. So from everything I saw on the fight film, his wrestling, he has the best wrestling on this entire card. Like truly dominant wrestling. And when you are so dominant in the wrestling department, it opens up your striking just because you can go do it. You're not afraid of getting taken down. His opponent is a BJJ savvy guy. So I think that Rinya Nakamura at 9,300, I might lock him in, Jason, because I don't think a lot of people just really know what's going on with this international card. I'm expecting him to have some heavy ownership. I think it's completely justified. He has to be cognizant of the savvy jujitsu that Toshiomi Kazama has, though, because Kazama has fantastic jujitsu. I just think that the top game of Rinya Nakamura, in addition to the superior striking, is going to keep him out of harm's way. So outside of a complete dart throw submission, I don't think Kazama's going to have many paths to victory here. So with all that being said, that's a long-winded way of me saying that Rinya Nakamura at 9,300 is going to be a staple for most, if not all, my lineup. So I love me some Rinya Nakamura.
I will tell you, and Matt asking me to pronounce all these names. I was actually trying to get into the UFC press website the other day because what they do is they put a MP3 file so you
Yeah.
can listen to these fighters say their names. So I'm not butchering them, but I think we're all going to struggle this week with some of these names.
Yeah, I mean, some of them are okay. I just get confused as to who I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like I can't put a face to the name yet. Just because I really didn't even watch the road to the UFC up until I saw this card coming. I'm like, oh boy, I better start diving in. And I wish I did because I feel like it was kind of a neat experience.
Next up, we got Park and Choi. Park 8,400, Choi 7,800. Park is a minus 200 betting favorite, plus 170 for Choi. So what's the Pete the Heat notes say on this one?
So the note says that I mean I like HyunSung Park. I think that he has excellent low kicks. And I saw him working with a team who I hold in pretty high regard, and that's Team Bangtao. And we've seen Alex Volkanovski work a lot with those guys. Basically, Tiger Muay Thai used to have a couple brothers, I believe the Hickman brothers. I think I'm correct on that, but they ended up leaving Tiger Muay Thai years ago, and they started their own facility called Team Bang Tao, and they started to get a ton of people going to train with them. JeongYwong Lee has gone and trained with them as well. So with all that being said, I like what I saw from some of the training footage of HyunSung Park. Excellent low kicks. The trainer has a calf kick pad on all the time, so he gets his guys to throw a ton of hands into calf kicks, which is the most effective thing out there at the moment. Um, and I do think that he has the better ground game in this matchup. And his opponent, SeungGuk Choi, actually comes from the Korean Zombies team. So this could be a very close fight. The odds on this, though, are kind of a head scratcher where you have Hyung-Sung Park approaching 2-1 territory, and then we have him priced at 8,400. So you're getting some value because I do think that if you go based on just the odds, he should have been a little bit higher up. I do like Hyung-Sung Park to win this bout, but I made sure I put semi-confident. I'm semi-confident just because Sunguk Choi, coming from the Korean Zombie team, I think he's going to look to implement some takedowns, has good hands, but I can see this being a striking matchup where it's a narrow fight and it goes the distance. So I'm picking Hyung-Sung Park. I think that if it does hit the mat, he has some of the better transitions and can actually capitalize on some submission attempts. So I'm going to go with Hyung-Sung Park here, semi-confident, but that does not mean I'm getting away from Sunguk Choi. It's a pretty close fight, to be honest.
Next up, we got a female matchup between Kim and Bohm. Bohm 7,200, Kim 9,000. JeongYwong Kim a minus 280 betting favorite. Mandy Bohm plus 230. Yeah. Do you even want to get to Mandy Bohm in this situation?
Let me tell you, bro. Not many times would I have ever sat there and said, "Yeah, let's get to Mandy Baum." And then I saw Ji Young Kim training at Syndicate, and I said, "Oh boy, do I do it?"
The
I don't know.
hatred
I
you
don't
have
know.
for
Listen,
Syndicate.
I know this might be one of the first times I'm ever backing a Syndicate fighter. Now, it's going against my gut. I'm being honest. My gut is that Mandy Baum's terrible. She's terrible. But she's improving. She's working a lot with Dewey Cooper, and the guys at Extreme Couture as well. I saw her working with Eric Nixick. Distance management seems to be the emphasis on this camp. Long range striking. The Ji-Young Kim has fought the more legitimate competition if you look at her resume. But I mean, she hasn't won in the longest time in the world. She has, in her past fights, lost to Jocelyn Edwards, Priscilla Cachoeira, Molly McCann, Alexa Grasso. 4-fight losing streak. Those 4 fighters are of an upper tier than anything Mandy Bohm has faced inside her entire MMA career. So one would think that all those fights will prepare Ji-Yeon Kim to just completely dismantle Mandy Bohm. I'm not going to really just have that MMA math type of breakdown where I'm like, yep, Ji-Yeon Kim's fought the better competition. You know, some of it was close. She just had a split decision over split decision loss to Jocelyn Edwards. I think Edwards is better than Bohm, so she's going to win this fight. I still think that even in a loss, there could be some room for Mandy Bohm to have a high floor just because of the output that Ji-Yeon Kim is going to put out there. I mean, listen to some of these significant strike numbers for Ji-Yeon Kim. Not landed, but she's through 193, 375, 361, and then all the others are above 120 significant strikes. That's a ton. When within Mandy Bohm's short UFC career, she's thrown only 93 and 108. This could be a situation where Ji-Yeon Kim treats Mandy Bohm like an everlast punching bag. I'm not going to be over here saying that this is going to be a staple play by any means. Everything points to Ji-Yeon Kim going to get a victory here and finally gets into the win column within the UFC. I'm just not going to say with conviction that a fighter on a 4-fight losing streak is a parlay piece or something for you guys to really plant your flag on. So I'm going to be favoring Ji-Yeon Kim, and it's kind of crazy because she's from Syndicate MMA, and you guys know I don't do that. But if you look at the ownership is a little low for a fighter that's favored so high. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a 9,000 fighter here. When I'm thinking about underdogs that potentially kind of stick out to me this week, Dennis at 7,700 is someone that I'm kind of looking at this week.
So I have 2 gut feelings, and I'm going to go against both of them. Gut feeling 1, Dennis Tallulah knocks out JeongYwong Park. Gut feeling 2, Mandy Bohm does enough even in a loss to kind of be a little bit relevant at 7,200. Dennis Tallulah has ridiculous power, and that was on display against Jamie Pickett. Throughout his entire career, he is susceptible to getting taken down, controlled, ragdolled, but I have to give him credit. He does a damn good job of getting back to his feet while walking towards the cage, getting back up, but spending most of the fights, losing minutes, and then trying to come back by throwing crazy combinations. JeongYwong Park is the better MMA fighter. That's kind of like the narrative this week. You have fighters that are the better mixed martial artists. It's just a matter of if they implement the correct game plan. I think that JeongYwong Park showed how well-rounded he could be against Joseph Holmes, who is a completely physical freak. Picked up a split decision over Eric Anders. The head-scratcher performance was against Gregory Rodriguez, who last week or the other week was in a very dangerous matchup. And I said, I like Gregory Rodriguez to win the fight, but I'm intrigued with the underdog. So I'm going to leave Gregory Rodriguez outside of my parlays. I kind of have the same feeling against JeongYwong Park. I'm picking JeongYwong Park to win here just because I think that he can pick up multiple takedowns. Listen to some of these takedown numbers. 5 of 10 against Marc-Andre Barriault, who's an equivalent foe to Dennis Tallulah. 4 of 4 against John Phillips. 2 of 5 against Tafon Nchukwu, who's super dangerous. 2 of 4 against Joseph Holmes. And we know that Tallulah looked better against Jamie Pickett. But if he gets taken down, I think it can be takedown city for JeongYwong Park. So I circled JeongYwong Park as potential takedown city candidate. But as far as like underdog with upside, outside of our boy Yi Ja, I think that Dennis Tallulah should be one of the most popular underdogs on the slate, and I think that the ownership is reflective of that.
And by far our biggest favorite on this fight card, Tatsuya Tahara, 9,600, a 12-1 betting favor against Jesus
Crazy.
Aguilar. Betting side, I think you're looking at the searching for those inside the distance props on Tara. But when we talk about from a DFS aspect, 9,600, huge price point. It's just, to me, it's just whether or not he pays it off.
Yeah, I don't think he does. I mean, he might, but I think it's just such a ridiculous price point. And Tatsuya Taira in 2 fights against Carlos Candelario, 96.7, CJ Vergara, 106.9. Neither one of those DFS scores are going to really justify a 9,600 price tag. I don't think that Jesus Aguilar is a bad opponent by any means. I think that he's pretty similar to CJ Vergara and Carlos Candelario, where he is good offensively, but defensively he's not the best. He has a great guillotine choke. I have to give him credit for that. And he will jump guillotine all the time. I think that jumping guillotine against a guy in Tatsuya Taira can put you in a poor position. 12-1 betting favorites, quite ridiculous for a young fighter, who's still developing. I think Tatsuya Taira could knock out Jesus Aguilar on the feet, has a piston right hand, has excellent trips and takedowns from the upper body. That's basically how he gets his opponents to the mat. And that's what I would say if I was coaching Tatsuya Taira, is like, listen, Jesus has a phenomenal guillotine. We're not going to shoot any single legs or double legs. Everything's going to be upper body trips, upper body, throws. So I think that Tatsuya Taira could get more takedowns in this bout because of Jesus Aguilar's skills everywhere. I'm almost thinking a decision happens. I know he picked up a submission over CJ Vergara, but I'm almost thinking that a decision happens. And 9,600, I think he's going to score in the 110 range. I don't know. I'm going to get to some other fighters and to some other combinations and let people chase that crazy favorite. He should be the favorite. He's going to win here. But if half the field's getting to Tatsuya Taira, I'm probably going to be on the other side saying, let me get a little different.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this, and this is, game theory. You've talked about this game theory in the past of trying to find an underdog that you think, obviously we've got 12 fights, so it's not a situation where we got, 14, 15 fights, but a 12-fight card. Are you looking at a Jesus Aguilar, a Mandy Bohm as potentially that fighter who may lose, but could ultimately result in you, finishing in, the top 10% of a GPP because they just score enough to allow you to get to other people?
Yeah, so it's a great point, great question, and appreciate it, Jason. Stephen Kozlo a couple weekends ago is basically my punt, where I expected him to have grappling success, could possibly win the fight, but he was just too cheap for what I was expecting his points to be. Jesus Aguilar is not a guy that I will consider. Neither would Toshiomi Kazama. I would start to look at Adam Fugitt, Mandy Bohm, and Yi Jia, because those 3 fighters to me are 3 fighters that I think at that price point, they have paths to victory. And Yi Jia is our darling this week. He's just my outright pick. I think that he's going to win the bout. But as far as like Mandy Bohm and Adam Fugitt, we saw Fugitt have some success against Michael Morales. Mandy Bohm hasn't had any success, but she could be in a high striking matchup where she's going to have to pick up the pace if she doesn't want to get dismantled against Ji-Young Kim. So in a loss, we could have some situations where a fighter of Fugitt either picks up a win or just does enough with his wrestling. I like to target wrestlers in this punt category. So I would probably say Adam Fugitt would be the Stephen Kozlo punt of the week. Yi Jia at 7,300 is an outright pick to win the fight. And usually when I have an outright pick underneath 7,500, I don't have to get desperate and go after another punt. You know what I mean? Like that 7,300 Yi Jia does just enough by himself for me to get to other people within the top 8,000 and 9,000 range.
Of course, if you got any questions, line those up in chat right now. We're going to get to those once we get through our straight up fight picks. Of course, these are not DFS related. Main event, I'm going with the favorite, Serghei Spivac.
Yeah, I'm going Serghei Spivac. I hate heavyweight fights, so I don't know. I don't know my success rate on the heavyweight fights, but I'm gonna go Serghei Spivac.
Next up, co-main event. I like the favorite in Dong Jung.
Same, Down Jung for me.
Then Tybura and Ivanov. I gotta go Tybura.
Same.
Slightly,
I have to.
Slightly.
Agree.
I like the Korean Superboy over Kyle Nelson.
Dooho Choi, baby. I hope so.
I gotta go with the big favorite over Fugitt. But I think Fugett's an interesting underdog.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna go with Kinoshita.
I will go with the slight favorite in Jubli.
Yeah, this is my least favorite fight on the card. Actually, JeongYwong Kim Mandy Bomb's pretty bad, but I'm gonna go with Jubli.
I mean, after what you said about Yi Jia, I gotta go with Jia here.
You know what's crazy though, Jason, is because his opponent is phenomenal. So JeongYwong Lee is a phenomenal prospect to watch with crazy finishing upside. Like, I just think that he could be outgunned in the wrestling department. So I'm gonna go with Yi Jia as well.
I will go Nakamura.
Nakamura, strongest feeling on the card. I love me some Nakamura this week.
I will go Park over Choi.
Yeah, Park.
I gotta go with JeongYwong Kim, even though I don't feel good about it.
Syndicate MMA, I hate it. I'm gonna go with Kim.
Give me Denise a little bit of an upset.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna go with Jung Park, despite my gut feeling Tulula knocks him out.
Then obviously everyone's gonna be on tar in this one. Let's
I'm going Tatsuro Taira as well.
Mention a question came over in our Discord, which our Discord totally free to join our community. Great chats that we have in there throughout the week, and we'll get this first one: best value plays under 8K on DraftKings. For me, best under 8K.
Easy job for me. I sound like a broken record. Outside of that, it's ugly.
Yeah, I mean, Tulin is one that I do like at 7,700.
Yep.
I mean, there's some punt plays that I don't mind going to. I mean, obviously Derrick Lewis is a punt play, Adam Fuget's a punt play. That's probably about the ones I from a punt play aspect I'm really going to try to get to.
Yeah, it's really, when you say under 8,000, it's really not an underdog like type of card where we think the dogs are barking. There could be so many unknowns that a lot of underdogs come through. But for me, like, it's Yi Jia, and then I'm probably going to say the next person is Tululin, and if I had to give you a third, it would be SeungGuk Choi, just because I think that matchup's going to be close. And it's a flyweight bout, which tend to go long, so it could be very competitive.
And of course, we appreciate everyone tuning in here for our preview of UFC Vegas 68, Bellator 290. Of course, both those on Saturday. Of course, as Pete mentioned, join the score, hit that like, hit the comment if you're watching this after the fact. We do respond to those comments. We're always paying attention to when comments are left here on the show. Pete, anything else you want to leave the viewers with?
No, I mean, just thank you guys for the consistent support. We really appreciate it. Comment on the video. Let us know if you have any questions. Join the Discord channel. That's really how you can get to us a lot easier. And in addition to that, let's try to get the channel to 500 subscribers. That's the goal. That's the goal in sight. 500 subscribers. That's the first goal that we like to get to, and we want to keep pumping out some Bellator, PFL, UFC content for you guys. And good luck. Let's start with Bellator. Make some money, build that bankroll, and then Jason's going to be snoozing, and I'm going to be up live betting this international UFC card.
Yeah, I will definitely be snoring my butt off by that point. There ain't no doubt about it. I appreciate everyone tuning in here to Fight HQ. Just like you heard Pete say, if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We appreciate everyone tuning in here for our preview of UFC Vegas 68 and Bellator 290.